Native American spots and sleep there, and you get wildly lost too, but always find your way because you know where the sun's at, and all you got to do is make it to the road and then walk. So that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, what was amazing about our canoe trips is, every corner was a surprise. You come across beaver dams everywhere, and every now and then you come around a corner and you'd be face to face with 2,000 pounds worth of moose.
Oh, sweet.
And they're not afraid of us.
No. I heard they're much bigger in person than you would think.
Absolutely,
yeah.
They are. They're monstrous. They're absolutely monstrous.
Wow. I'd love to see that.
These aren't the skinny little things. These are the big Clydesdale-looking things.
Nice.
Huge.
I love animals, like the majesty of what they are. I'd love to see that.
You ever, hiked in the backcountry of Montana?
Not up that way. Arizona, maybe, but...
You gotta do Montana. Especially Glacier National Park.
Okay.
There's one road that goes through the park. It's called the Going to the Sun Road. The rest of the park is you gotta hike to it.
Okay.
And in the summertime, it's nothing but, glaciers, mountains, beautiful waterfalls, wildflowers everywhere. It's just incredible.
That'd be awesome.
And I've traveled all over the world. I've been to 42 different countries.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful up there. It's almost, you want to talk about spiritual, the nature is so beautiful that you really feel closer to God.
Good. I love that.
Yeah.
Have you been to India?
No.
No? I'm trying to get there.
No, a lot of places I haven't been. I haven't been anywhere in Africa. I haven't been to China. I haven't been to India. Honestly, India's not real high on my list because I just envision it as a filthy, overcrowded shithole where I'm going to have chronic diarrhea the whole time.
Yeah, there are definitely that, kind of thing there, but I want to see this ashram.
See, for you it's spiritual. For me, when I travel, it's about nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Nature is what I would consider my temple for the spirituality. But I like to see things, because I grew up, I got ordained Christian. I got my Bible degree and all that stuff. But then I read all the other books, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Tao texts, all these different, just other religious books. And I find God in there, in all of them.
Well, what about also
ways.
the great philosophers like Sartre and Nietzsche and all them? They're not religion, but they have some interesting insights.
Yeah, and I take God as to be much more than just some extra-dimensional being pointing things. God is much more complicated than that. So I look for that everywhere.
I find it in nature.
Yeah.
I don't find it in man-made things.
Have you noticed the mathematical equations to nature?
Oh, the Fibonacci numbers and all
Yeah.
that? Sure.
Yeah. Not a lot of people even know what a Fibonacci sequence is.
It's the number is the sum of the two that preceded it.
Right.
So 2 and 3 is going to be 5, 8,
Yep.
13, 21.
And a very perfect example of that is the Romanesco broccoli. It's the one that spirals out from the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Or, snail shells.
Yeah. The math is incredibly perfect in some of this stuff. And like the bees created the hexagon structure in order to build their honeycombs as strong and spacious as possible. And it's just absolutely incredible. And I think that math has more to do with religion than people want it to.
Well, I think, if you want to talk Darwinian, things happen over millions and billions of years and certain mutations happen. When those mutations happen, if they prove to be advantageous, then they become dominant.
Right.
So, I'm waiting for that human mutation that says, being a fat guy and losing your hair is somehow optimal.
Hey, the dad bod is the hottest thing going on right now. It said studies show that 52% of women prefer the dad bod now than muscles.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I don't buy that.
I don't either.
Because they're not exactly lining up.
No.
Oh, that's the funny thing about studies.
Yeah, I know.
You can always find one to support whatever wacky thing.
I used to tell people 92% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the guy that asked the accountant, what's 1 + 1? And the accountant responds, well, what do you want it to be? But
Oh man. So do you hike much in Dawson? Or Dahlonega?
Well, I actually had an apartment down in Costa Rica. I'm kind of retired. I should be working, but I'm not. I'm kind of in that mode.
You said Costa Rica?
Yeah.
Is it true the government's not very involved
Not very involved?
in anything in Costa Rica?
They are and they aren't. I mean, the government's pretty damned involved because they basically set the salaries for every conceivable occupation.
Okay.
I call that involved.
Okay.
The police are everywhere. I call that involved. But you're not going to get arrested or thrown in jail unless you actually commit a crime. And for that reason, when I'm down there, I feel more free.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just heard different things from people, so I wasn't sure.
They're not really involved where they're involved here.
Okay.
But they're still involved.
Here they're like all up in your Facebook.
Here the cops are in your face about everything.
Yeah.
My brother has some investment properties, and one of them was like one of these industrial, in these industrial parks, you got all these units.
Yep.
And one of them, he hired me to kind of renovate it, and it was out in Woodstock. And I'm there and I was like, drywall repairs, painting, all that stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And it's 11 o'clock at night, and I'm still there. And I'm working on one of the bathrooms because it had office space in it as well. So I was renovating one of the bathrooms, and the hallways were kind of dark. I only had the areas lit up where I was working.
Yeah.
And now the back garage was kind of like the warehouse, and the door was up, and I was kind of parked in the warehouse. I come around the corner, and there's 2 policemen standing there with their guns drawn on.
Oh my God.
I almost shit myself. And they're like, "What are you doing? I mean, what are you doing here?" And once I showed them my ID, proved that I was legally there, I kind of got in their face a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
I said, "What in the F gives you the right to come walking into a private property with your guns drawn? What gives you that right?"
That's a lawsuit, probably.
Oh, I was mad because they literally scared the out of me.
Yeah. I believe you. I mean,
because they weren't standing in the light. I saw these shadowy figures like this.
with guns, yeah. What are you going to think,
I'm like,
Getting robbed.
I just froze. I mean, it was immediately apparent that they were cops.
Yeah.
Because they were in uniform. But,
That scared me to death.
yeah.
Jeez. I'm extra skittish ever since I got out of the Air Force, though. So that would scare me. I don't like it when people come up behind me or around corners.
Sometimes when I'm Ubering, I'll take somebody to the airport, and Uber doesn't tell us where people are going, so every ride's a surprise.
Are you serious? You don't know how far you have to go?
Sometimes they give us what they call a long trip warning, but for every other ride, they don't tell us where we're going.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had no idea you were driving down to Marietta today.
I don't care.
Okay.
I'm happy with it.
Okay.
Nice fare. It's all good.
Yeah, good.
So, I don't even know where I was going with this. Anyway, so that's how Uber works. Is we're not told. Even if it's a long trip warning, that doesn't mean I was going down here. I could have been going over to Brazelton or anywhere, So, but here's the saving grace. Twice a day, we get to use a feature called the destination feature, where we say, this is where we want to go.
Okay.
Try to pair us up with people at least going in that direction. So although you're at the mercy of Uber all day, at the end of the day, you can at least say, come on, I want to go home.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So you save that for the end of the day?
Yeah.
Take advantage without paying any attention to anything.
Well, I mean, all you had to do is tell me 6 kids, and I know you're up to your eyeballs.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
I'm up to my eyeballs with all kinds of things. Worst of which is always court with the ex.
Court with the ex?
Oh, yeah.
You got an ex-wife that's making your life hell?
You could say that. Or she's helping me to build my patience for the future.
It's a positive way to look at it.
Yeah. It's a terrible situation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Relentless. Very relentless. But we have the kids at our house, so we're happy.
Well, you know what's interesting is when in my younger days, I married my college sweetheart,
All right.
and we were married for 5.5 years.
Okay, that's about right.
We were very different people. I mean, she moved to Canada when she was in the 5th grade from Sarajevo, Yugoslavia,
Oh,
which
okay.
is now Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Yeah.
And she was everything a guy could dream of. She was beautiful. She was thin. She was intelligent, articulate, classy. Well, I was none of those things. And, as much as I loved her, we were just not compatible human beings.
Yeah.
And when that was all said and done, I said, I am never going to do that again. I never have.
Yeah, that's good for you.
And you know what? I have no regrets. I like being single.
It can be a wonderful thing, to be honest with you. I just ended up meeting somebody who I really, really liked. I
I
couldn't help it. But
I haven't, so it's made it easy.
yeah, so you don't want to just settle in life.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I had to learn this second go around is that I can't pick people who are the opposite of me because they need what I provide. Because then all that happens is it's a constant cycle of they use what you provide over and over and over and over.
It's called a give and take relationship. You give, they take.
Exactly. There was no return in that investment.
Relationships 101. A healthy relationship is 50-50. Give and take. There's some reciprocation.
Yep.
Otherwise, one person just gets drained.
I know. Yeah, it's terrible. And it's not fun to feel that way because you're confused between, am I doing something wrong in this relationship or am I being used? What's what? Am I not doing enough? Or?
Right. And that's another thing in our, noble male culture.
Right.
It's not inappropriate to ask the question, what's in this for me?
Right.
And, in our white knight society, that question's not supposed to be asked. We're supposed to be, the man on the horse saving her from whatever. And I don't subscribe to that philosophy anymore.
It's just, how can you promote gender equality if one gender is supposed to provide everything for the other?
Well, and the problem with feminism is it makes a lot of assumptions that aren't true. Men and women may be equal and they should be treated equal, but men and women are not the same.
Right.
And to make the leap from equality to men and women are the same is a grave mistake. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think, physiologically there are several variables. I think that spiritually on a level we're the same, but that's where it stops.
Yeah.
Because
or in layman's terms, bitches be crazy.
It's true that someone who has a higher estrogen level in their body, mainly females I'm speaking about, they are more emotionally driven and not based on logic. The testosterone hormone is more of a logic-based thing, but then you also have the instinct-based need to attack and be territorial. But when you put the logic and the emotions together, that's a functional thing. But when one of them tries to have all of it, it's going to tip over. We need women, or else we would run this whole entire universe into the ground. But they need us as well.
Yeah. So it's always a battle of the sexes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of dumb. I mean, if you're with someone who wants to be in a certain role and you want to be in another role, and it works.
Well, and the other thing too is, feminism teaching women that they can do anything a man can do. Well, I mean that's all well and good, but how many women do you see out, hanging steel and paving the roads?
Not a lot.
Not many.
Not a lot. I have.
It happens.
I've run across it. Like, I did this federal contractor job where I put these giant rods into the side of a mountain, filled it with concrete, cut the rods off, and then spray concrete on top of the mountain.
So stabilizing it.
Yeah. It was a geostabilization. And there was one girl who worked in the company. She was stronger than half the dudes.
Well, but you can't point to the exception and say,
Nope.
aha, there's the
Of
rule.
course not.
Yeah.
that doesn't work in biology. It doesn't work in that either. I mean, you get one albino animal, the rest of them aren't going to be like that.
And then some of us, we're not albinos. We just don't tan very well.
What's the ethnic diversity in Canada?
Everything.
A lot of natives?
Everything. In fact, Toronto, it's said that 50% of the population wasn't even born in Canada.
Wow.
So when people talk about, Atlanta, there's so much diversity here, I kind of roll my eyes. Instead of the diversity here, we got black, white, Hindu, and Mexican.
There's a forced type of diversity here.
Other.
Yeah, other.
But in Canada, I mean, geez, you got people from absolutely freaking everywhere.
Yeah.
And it makes it kind of interesting.
Like obscure European countries and things too?
Oh. And third world crap holes.
Okay. I'd really love to visit Canada.
Yeah.
Used to, you didn't need a passport, but it changed sometime around 2008.
Well, and diversity is a wonderful thing, but too much diversity destroys your own culture.
Yeah. If that's something that needs to be held on to, a particular culture.
Well, I think we all like to, know that our home is still our home, that Canada is still Canadian,
right,
not Bangladeshi. So, I mean, there's a reason that we've always limited immigration so that they can become us, we don't become them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I understand. From a nationalist point of view.
Well, not even from a nationalist point of view. I mean, there is an American culture, and the melting pot, the integration.
Yeah.
I know what I'm saying. I don't think that's xenophobic or anything like that. I just think that when you move somewhere,
well, you should assimilate to that.
You should assimilate.
I agree.
You shouldn't expect them to bend over backwards to accommodate you.
No, I agree. You shouldn't go there in order to use anything. You should go there to be a functioning member of the society. Just on a whole other end of things.
What I was going to say too is when you enter into that society, you are entering into a society that has established laws, established rules, established norms, established cultures.
Yeah, it's already there.
And you're expected to abide by them.
Right.
You want to change them, vote.
Vote, yeah. Pay your taxes, do what you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Or buy an island and start your own.
I would have a funny feeling if you had your own island and you were like, running your own laws. I think some international body would come in and kind of put a stop to you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, your boat washed up on shore, you're now my slave.
You can't be a dictator here.
No.
No, I look at things slightly from a Native American standpoint, that it doesn't matter who's in this country ever now, because it's the same thing back then. Immigration came and took over.
The Europeans settled and took over.
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
it really was kind of not a good thing.
There's actually a lot of, at least in our history, a lot of trips here prior to all of that. From different places, from the Spanish. People who probably didn't even know they were at a new country at all. The Yamakra Indians who became the Creeks had meetings with Viking sailors. And they have all these pictures that were drawn and stories and different things of it. It's just the Europeans who came and decided to own it.
Well, I mean, before the Europeans got here, I mean, this country was basically divvied up between various Indian tribes, and they had their territories.
For sure, yeah. You've seen the maps, I'm sure, of all the northern nations.
And they had their battles and their turf wars and all of that.
It was established. So, see where I think about it like that. It's like this whole thing was built on something that's not what it's trying to represent now.
But the same could be, the human beings being a migratory species. It's always been that way. Pick a country.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
I agree. Ever since written history, it's been that way probably before. Have you read any of the Sumerian texts or books that were found? There's a lot of good historical stuff in there. I think they dug up a copy of Gilgamesh, which is a Sumerian book. Gilgamesh tells about the flood, just from a different culture standpoint.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was a churchgoer when I was a kid, but not as an adult.
It's just fun to see all the different cultures, even the ancient Hindu Veda texts, whatever, have a flood story. That's what made me go off on all the different religions, is because, well, how can one be 100% correct if they're all talking about an event in a different way?
Floods happen everywhere, though. I mean, floods
global-
are a natural occurrence.
A global flood.
But there's no way of people knowing a global flood could have occurred back in those days because they had no way to communicate over long distances.
Well,
So for somebody to claim that the entire world was flooded, no, their entire world was flooded.
I think that to make an assumption on what technology they may or may not have had is potentially ignorant.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there would be evidence, I would think, in the written text or in physical.
Well,
items found.
there's hieroglyphs in the pyramids of giant light bulbs that they had built. That
We assume they're light bulbs, but is that, we see an image carved on something and we say,
that's
wow,
what.
that
Well,
looks
that's
like
what
a
I mean
modern
is that we don't know.
We don't know.
Like, what if they had a different way to do it that we didn't figure out?
Right. I mean, I've been down in Peru and I've flown over the Nazca lines and you see the spaceman carved into the
Yeah?
side of the mountain.
Oh God, that'd be cool.
And it was kind of cool because this is a part of Peru that really hasn't rained in 2,000 years.
Really?
It just doesn't rain. It's the Anaconda Desert. It's the
Okay.
driest place on Earth.
Didn't know that.
So all of these Nazca lines, they're not getting washed away or anything. That's why they're still there.
That's amazing.
And but it goes back to my previous, often with things like Stonehenge and Nazca lines and all that, to me, it's much ado about nothing.
Right.
There's nothing magical about these things to me.
Of course.
There's nothing mystical. Human beings made them, whoop-de-doo. I mean, Stonehenge, for instance, okay, there's so much made about Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm.
When you go there, it's just a ring of rocks. It's no big deal.
What I find intriguing about it is that it is on a specific ley line. And the other Stonehenges that have existed are also on other lines. It's just weird, But I think if I were to do something in my house, make it weird, and leave it there for 1,000 years, someone would have all kinds of assumptions about what I had done with it. You know what I mean? When, to be honest, it could have been absolutely nothing. I did it for myself, and then it got left there.
And you're going to find, I mean, there are people out there that still believe, the flat earthers. They believe the earth is flat.
Yeah.
And they believe it's some kind of worldwide conspiracy to hide that fact. These people genuinely believe this.
I believe that the earth is a sphere.
Well, yeah,
and,
of course.
and that our dimensions that we exist in may be flat.
Beyond my physics. Do I go this way?
Left one, yeah.
Up.
But what I mean by that is nothing is flat. It's just we perceive dimensions.
Well, modern string theory assumes 11 additional dimensions.
Yeah. So that's more along the lines of where I'm thinking with it. I certainly believe that if I started at point A and went a straight line, I'd end up at point A again.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I look at, the universe is obviously something that can be understood if we have the capacity to understand it. And I draw the analogy, take a carburetor on a car and try to make a duck understand what it is and how it works and why it exists. Right. That duck will never understand it. It's beyond its capacity.
Well, the duck's species didn't invent it.
Right. Well, not only that, but even if the duck didn't invent it, the duck just does not have the intellectual capacity to understand it. And that's kind of what we are.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are understandable. We just don't have the capacity to understand them.
I agree, and I think sometimes that's why certain people have like near-death experiences and have a different perception. Because it takes certain experiential events to understand things from a different point.
Right, and once again...
But we're the only animal who can do this.
Well, if we experience these things, though, once again, what we are experiencing is our interpretation of what we experience.
Absolutely.
It may or may not be what was actually experienced.
I agree. I mean, I like to think if I'm looking at that truck up there. Is that truck up there in front of me on the road, or is that truck inside my mind? And I'm perceiving how far away from me it is. Which is it? Is it both? Or is my mind projecting itself over there to represent where the truck is? You know, what is it? And then you look at mental illness and people see the world completely differently. So who's seeing it properly?
I had a friend in college, and her brother was a brilliant guy, but was diagnosed as schizophrenic as 21.
Yep.
And it came on when he thought the cat was possessed and was trying to shove it into the oven.
Oh my God.
But he takes his medications and he's fine. But that's something that seems to kind of hit people in their early 20s, and they're fine until then, and it's just one of those things that comes on.
Yeah, especially if they experiment with drugs, it can bring it out a lot faster. But if you're prone to it anyway, it will come with schizophrenia. That's what we were looking at my stepson about.
Well, modern pharmacology has done wonders for what ails us.
Yeah. You ever listen to this guy named Terence McKenna? He was around in the 70s and 80s mostly, but he was on the forefront of a lot of that stuff. He actually would...
What was he, a researcher, or what was he?
I guess most people would describe him as a psychonaut.
A psychonaut?
A psychonaut. He would travel the world searching for different psychedelics and then try to figure out what their function on the brain was and how they could be used medicinally before anyone believed that anything had medicinal properties.
I mean, a lot of these things either mimic, enhance, or block our own neurotransmitter chemicals.
Yep. And he's one of the ones who was on the forefront about finding out schizophrenia can be, brought on by drugs as well.
I've done a little work in artificial intelligence and neural nets and deep learning and all that. And what fascinates me is we develop this computer model that just emulates the neurons, all
right.
The connections and everything. And we don't, and we tweak certain variables with each of the data points to, through a feedback loop to get it to learn.
Okay.
And what's fascinating about this is, we get these programs that can, basically take an image, say the alphabet. It slices it up into pixels. All those pixels become data points, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
We get this software through its millions of data points to learn to recognize it. And through a feedback loop, we teach it first. And what's fascinating is that even in the computer sense, the mechanism by which that learning occurs is still somewhat vague to us, which is bizarre because we're the ones creating the controlled environment.
Right. Hey. I mean, I guess it's kind of like we know that you can send electricity through a wire, a copper wire or something, right? But we don't know exactly what it's doing. I mean, maybe we do.
I'm sure we do.
I was trying to come up with an example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's this phenomenon in quantum mechanics, which absolutely boggles the mind. And it says if you take two particles that are entangled, that are connected, and separate them by 1,000,000 miles, what you do to this particle is instantly reflected in the other one.
Yes.
Which makes you wonder. Which makes you think, just what the hell is space and time?
It's nothing.
We live in 4 dimensions, right? X, Y, Z, and time. And even Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. And then you've got Heisenberg, at the subatomic level, where the act of looking at, trying to observe something, changes it.
Yeah, or brings it into existence, or...
Yeah.
Have you seen the one that was simultaneously in 2 places at once?
Yeah, that's spooky action at a distance.
So
it's
the same one. Okay.
Exactly. So,
I mean, I think that it's all... first of all, time itself is something I believe occurred simultaneously, all at once.
Well, here's something that most people don't know. One of the things Einstein did was basically define gravity as, there isn't any magic force pulling things together. Gravity basically stretches space.
Right.
And and we use that, case in point, when you get closer to a massive object, time runs more slowly.
Right. Which means time has mass.
Yeah. We go in here?
It's one of these auto shops. Yeah, that's it right there.
American?
Wildlife. That's the one. That truck is the one I'm getting.
Oh, Mr. The time goes.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, that's bullshit. Well, let me tell you where it's not bullshit. All these GPS satellites we have in geosynchronous orbit, because they're further away from the Earth than we are on Earth, they have to make minute adjustments because of the difference in the rate at which time travels on the satellites and here at ground, because GPS is all about synchronization.
Yeah.
And if they didn't make that adjustment, every single GPS coordinate on Earth would be off by 6 miles.
Yeah, there's a physicist who was saying that if two people were born and put on a watch and set their watches exactly to the same time, if they met again in their 70s, their times would be off.
Probably, because one may be living on a place in the Earth where gravity's a little different.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So you can live longer living in a different place.
Which is why, if you go into a black hole, you're going to see yourself falling from your own perspective, but somebody who can see you from the outside is just going to see you frozen. Because their time is going so much different.
Weird.
Yeah. Weird.
It makes you wonder if when you're looking at someone, if their time is completely different than your time and you're looking at a different time.
Right. For instance, like